The 1.8-mile-long Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn has been a dumping ground for New York City's hazardous water and heavy metals for decades. In 2010, the pollution was deemed so bad that the Environmental Protection Agency stepped in and named the canal a Superfund site.
It's always been a smelly mess. It's been disgusting, really. Some of the things that you flush away go in there.
Despite the canal being declared a Superfund site almost a decade ago, the cleanup process has progressed at a glacial pace as the EPA fights with the City of New York and the companies responsible for some of the environmental damage.
The reason why it's taken so long for the canal to start its cleanup is because in order to fund the actual cleaning of the canal, the EPA has to identify what's called potentially responsible parties, which is to say the historic bodies or organizations or companies that cause the canal to be polluted with toxic waste.
The lack of progress at the hundreds of languishing Superfund sites across the country has become the major focus of the EPA under Administrator Scott Pruitt.
I don't think a lot of people realize the significance of the program, but we have these 1,330 plus sites across the country that have been listed on a national priority list. And these sites have lead in the soil, they have uranium in the soil, they pose risk to health locally, to drinking water, and to citizens just using their private property. And these sites have been on that national priority list for decades. And there's just been a lack of urgency, a lack of response by this agency to do some of the most tangible, beneficial things for citizens to improve the environment locally.
Pruitt is one of the most polarizing figures in the Trump administration. Before taking the helm at the EPA, Pruitt was Oklahoma's Attorney General, a job that saw him sue the EPA more than a dozen times and also develop close ties with many in the fossil fuel industry. Since taking over at the agency, Pruitt has shifted the EPA's focus to what he calls a back-to-basics approach, moving away from combating climate change and instead focusing on cleanup efforts at Superfund and other environmentally damaged areas. Pruitt's past and his shift of priorities at the agency has earned him numerous critics, ranging from environmental activists to former EPA administrators like George W. Bush appointee Christine Todd Whitman, who argue that the role of the EPA has changed since its inception and must also tackle climate change alongside environmental damage. Pruitt, however, argues that the EPA has in the past moved too slowly with its cleanup efforts, and the criticism leveled against him is unfounded.
I find it remarkable, actually, that some of this criticism is actually being levied. Here we are trying to do some of the most basic, fundamental work to serve the American citizen, to actually show progress, to get sites off a list, to actually serve people in Westlake and St. Louis and serve people in East Chicago, actually make decisions, get progress done, and people want to come in and be speculative about whether that's good or not. Like no action is good?
Despite the Trump administration's EPA making its presence known at particular Superfund sites, such as Westlake Nuclear Waste Dump in Missouri and the USS Lead site in East Chicago, Indiana, residents in Gowanus say they have seen very little progress made at the canal. While much of this has to do with the ongoing battle over who is ultimately responsible for paying for the cleanup, activists say that Pruitt can take the legal steps to get the ball rolling.
Pruitt has to empower the engineers and the people designated in charge of the canal cleanup to be able to exercise the power that they are legally given to make the PRPs indeed engage with the cleanup and do it in a timely process. I could argue with great evidence that the city has held up the process over and over again by questioning all of the scientific data and all of the process of the EPA administrator involved in this. Whether or not it's feasible depends on really how much Pruitt is truly interested in engaging with the cleanup process of all these Superfund sites.
The entire canal cleanup was originally scheduled to be completed between 2021 and 2022. But given the delays and political infighting, that seems unlikely, leaving many Brooklyn residents hoping the canal will be cleaned up sometime in their lives.
I mean, I'm going to be 77. How much? I would like to see it in my lifetime, you know.